don't ever mistake like God's will and the advancement of what he is doing for your own like glory.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think that's like one of the takeaways. And I think we've been there, man. Like it's so tempting, right? To like watch God use you, do something through you.
Right.
And it's so tempting to take the credit. Yo, welcome back to the Vibes Daily Podcast. It is day 242 of our year-long series we have titled Devoted, as we are journeying through the entire Bible from cover to cover, from Genesis to Revelation. You have joined us here in the book of Jeremiah as we actually bring it to a close here on our last day of reading. I am back with my wife, Victoria. I was here again, as I said, just finishing out the book, 4 more chapters to go.
Yeah.
Finish the book of Jeremiah, which we will do here today. And so we pick up in the middle of God's essentially threats and warnings, I should say, probably not threats, warnings to these different nations. Yesterday, we were able to cover Egypt, the Philistines, and the Moabites. Today, we will deal with the Ammonites. It's kind of where we will start here. And then eventually the Edomites and Damascus here in a little bit. But we start here in chapter 49, dealing with the Ammonites. And again, these are a little shorter than kind of some of the threats to or the warnings to earlier. But what jumped out to you here in chapter 49 as God deals with Ammon?
Yeah, this one was interesting. Well, verse 3. Verse 3, this city's called Ai, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you just see AI?
Like artificial intelligence?
Yes.
Or Allen Iverson?
Didn't see the latter, but that's something that would stick out for you.
Yes, it was.
That's your guy.
And
That's
it's my
your
guy. He was AI before artificial intelligence.
He sure was. He's the original.
In my opinion,
Missing here.
the LG.
Yeah, it keeps sticking out to me every time I read it. I was like, it's not AI, Victoria. Like, I can't keep saying in my mind as I'm reading it, AI. Like,
yeah.
Pretty
definitely
sure they
not.
did.
I guess actually technically this would be the original. This definitely came before Allen Iverson. So.
This is the original.
So.
He was in BC. Okay, but yeah. That was just for free. But yeah, I think one of the big things, and because he said they say some of the same things, but the theme that we mentioned yesterday, I'm jumping all the way down to the end of their declaration that the Lord has pronounced against them.
Yeah,
was this verse 6 of how there is this justice where some will be restored and some won't. And the Ammonites here, we see that like after all of this destruction that he has pronounced against them, that he'll restore the fortunes of the Ammonites. And I don't know, I just keep picking up on like there's nobody that is too bad, right? Like who is the Philistines. We found the Philistines were bad enough to not get this this kind of declaration to be restored. But yeah, I'm like, Lord, who all these people have like been serving other gods way before the Israelites, right? Like they've been wilding out.
Yeah.
But yet you're willing to still extend grace.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a good call out. And I wonder because, we've talked about this before, that when we deal with like the lineage of Lot, we deal with the lineage of Abraham, we deal with like Ishmael's lineage, right? Keturah's lineage. Because, we obviously have Isaac from Abraham, you have Ishmael from Hagar, but you also have Abraham's wife Keturah. And, the descendants from there that like, what we really come to find out is that all these nations that they're going against oftentimes are they like distant cousins,
cousins,
right? Yeah. Like that just came from. And so I do wonder if like a lot of the mercy that is shown is simply because as much as they are not the chosen people from Abraham,
Yeah.
Isaac, and Jacob, that like they are still part of that promise to Abraham that like I will make you many nations, right? Like, and you know, your descendants will be countless, and you know, those kind of things that like
Yeah.
it seems like God keeps relenting against those distant cousins of the Israelites, the Moabites, the like you say, the Ammonites, like some of those individuals that like I wonder if that's where some of that's coming from. Is that like this is still his way of keeping his promise to Abraham by saying you will be these many nations,
Yeah.
versus like wiping them out completely and kind of starting over.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah. We do get still another god, right? That's referenced here. So Milcom is
Is that Molech still? Isn't that? I feel like my commentaries mentioned that was like Malcolm was also known as Molech.
Molech, yeah, which is the god that you know they often had the children sacrifices to and things of that nature. Yeah, so that's another reference to other gods that's being worshipped and God going after them as well, which took place. But anything else that stuck out to you about the Ammonites before we get to Edom?
Not for me.
Okay. Well, yeah. So Edom, again, another cousin. Edom, Esau's descendants, right? Esau being Jacob's brother, so like even closer,
Yeah.
as far as relation to the Israelites than even like Lot's descendants are.
Right.
And
thank you, commentary. Let me just say that because I begin to mix up all the time.
Who?
These descendants, like Edom versus the Moabites or something. I get them mixed up.
Yeah. Edom's the easier one for me because Edom and Esau just sound so similar. They both give those E's, but and I mean it also says in verse 10, at least in my version, but I will strip Esau bare. So like that kind of
that
kind of helps,
yeah,
right? A little bit, or you know, verse 8, I'll bring Esau's calamity on him.
Sure.
But yeah, what jumped out to you about what God has to say for Edom?
Well, you kind of took my first two. I mentioned Esau. Stripping him bare and stuff like that. Because it says his descendants will be destroyed along with his relatives and neighbors. He will no longer exist. And when he said relatives and neighbors, I didn't know if he was talking about just like literal neighboring and relatives of Edom, or if he was talking about Israelites, like you and your kinfolk, like y'all going to be exiled, right, and destroyed. But yeah, I think that was the first thing that jumped out to me. But then verse 16, like we have seen before, like the Moabites. Here in verse 16 is talking about like as to the terror you cause, your arrogant heart has deceived you, right? And so this is arrogance again that the Lord is pointing out and punishing people for.
Yeah, it's good.
How about you?
Well, I mean, I think what you mentioned before, like, I think it's interesting that Edom doesn't get, at least, you know, here this restorative fortunes, right? Like, we don't get this reference that Edom's going to get that opportunity to be restored kind of at the end of this. And so I think that is very interesting. And again, especially because their relation to Jacob is so much closer and to Israel so much closer. You know, I find that so interesting. And again, we remember this even as we talked about in Isaiah, because again, this, to be clear, this section also very much looks like one of the sections in Isaiah, because Isaiah does something similar, right, where he goes through all these different nations. Right. I think it's like chapters 22-ish through something. But like, we even said back then, like, God had been kind of holding a grudge. I'm gonna say holding a grudge. We had been upset at Edom for a while.
For quite some time.
Pretty much from the time that Israelites got exiled, not exiled, but it escaped and delivered from Egypt in Exodus. That like when that happened and the Edomites didn't let them like cross through their land and stuff, like he's been upset for a minute.
Yeah,
so like
go against Edom.
Yeah, so like, you know, even back in Isaiah there was a reference to that. So again, I don't know if it's something of that nature that like there's something that Edom's really done
Mm-hmm.
that's been so challenging. But yeah, just noticing as we've paid attention now to how these different ones have ended, it did what wasn't said also stuck out to
Right.
me specifically with them.
Yeah, which was missing.
Yeah.
And I think he got real bossy too in this verse 19, where he considers himself like a lion, right, coming through the thickets, and saying he will chase Edom away from her land.
Mm.
But I love this questioning at the end of this verse. It's like, who is the shepherd who can stand against me?
Because he's a lion.
Because he's the lion. He's the lioness. I mean, normally he is the shepherd,
Yeah.
right? Normally he is the shepherd, and he's like, what lion or what beast could
Mm-hmm.
I'm caring for my flock. But like now he's like, I'm not the shepherd right now. Like, I'm the lion. And in this position, there is no shepherd to protect y'all.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. It's interesting. That's a good one. Okay. We have a few different people to get through. So starting at 23, we get to Damascus. Not a whole lot here, but what sticks out to you in these few verses?
Labor pains.
More labor pains.
In verse 24. Like we mentioned yesterday.
Yeah.
There's more labor pains, distress that has ceased.
Yeah.
So yeah, that jumped out to me, of course, at first. But yeah, this Hamath in Arpad that jumped out here in verse 23. I guess he was in different cities, right? They're putting to shame, but I feel like when he's mentioning these cities, they probably have like some type of like association with a place of worship, probably for them, which just has been the theme of him calling out these different cities. So not sure there, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. So just kind of those cities specifically.
Mm-hmm.
There's not it's not a whole lot that's different, right? Like he kind of makes some very similar references here. Again, it's just another city that he's kind of going after.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I think like verse 25 was just interesting. Not one I kind of completely understood.
Right.
Just like, how can the city of praise not be abandoned? The town that brings me joy. Like, I was really curious, like, what this reference to the city of praise is. Because like Damascus is not, it's not a city in any of the Israelite territories.
Right.
Like, so yeah, just, it was one that like, and I didn't see a whole lot of reference to it in my commentary to give me more.
They gave me nothing.
More info on. So like I said, it was just one that I just thought was interesting, but I couldn't really, get more to. But yeah, not a whole lot. He'll set fire to it and some other things here.
Yep.
That's okay. Yeah, but then we get, Kedar and Hazer, right? Again, more people that Babylon specifically and Nebuchadnezzar came after and destroyed. Anything jump out to you in these verses, kind of 28 through 33?
Yeah. This 31. Says, rise up, attack a nation at ease, one living in security. This is the Lord's declaration. They have no doors, not even a gate bar. They live alone. It just really jumped out like, okay, like, were they really like chilling? Like a country not really at war with a lot of people, not a target, not a threat for many people, like out here living, still doing wrong, right? Like still not following Yahweh, I believe, like doing other things, but it does seem like he is like paints this imagery of them like the guys got their house open. They got the doors open wide.
Yeah, that's good. I think for me, what really jumped out to me was like, I don't know, one of the reflections I'm just having as a whole with this is one of the things that still strikes me, as amazing.
Mhm.
It's just like this still specific call out of these kings, right? Like you mentioned this a little bit yesterday when you talked about like Egypt's king specifically that was called by name, but
Right.
more so just this idea that like, Jeremiah is instructed to like give these messages to
Mhm.
these different nations and say like, yeah, Nebuchadnezzar is coming to get y'all,
Yeah.
right? Like in this particular case, like just like just know this is coming. And again, I just can't get over the idea that like there is this the same thing I said about Isaiah, but seeing this again in Jeremiah, like this idea that there is the prophet, there's someone who's delivering a message from the Lord
Mhm.
with such accuracy
Yes.
and detail
Yes.
as to what's happening. Like I said, in hindsight,
Mhm.
this feels easy to believe and hear and know because we know how history plays out. But just trying to imagine in the moment what these kingdoms experienced or felt or thought, right? When Jeremiah sends them this letter or he comes before them and declares it wherever, or they just hear the rumors of what Jeremiah said,
Right.
or however they get this information. Um, and like, yeah, like one of the things we're wrestling with through reading these prophecies is like even just the space and place of the prophetic in today's day and age, right?
Mhm.
And like
Mhm.
again, are we paying enough attention to whatever God may be saying? Are we even opening up our minds and in our eyes and ears to the prophetic,
Mhm.
right? And like giving and creating space for that. And if so, what would God be saying to us?
Yeah.
Like, will we be getting some similar clarity?
Of beware, destruction's on the way, because that's normally what it be.
Well, yeah, but like even just the specifics of like people and like
Mhm.
timelines and what that will look like. I don't know. So again, I was still really struck just because this one speaks to Nebuchadnezzar a little bit more than it had in like Damascus and some
Yeah.
others. But like
It's not
just
just kingdom from the north.
right.
You know.
But like to specifically do that, like I said, it just I don't know, it's just really interesting to me to see that play out, and I'm really curious how they experience that. But
Yeah.
I know we got to keep moving because we still have 3 more chapters to get through today. So the end of 49, we get to Elam, which again is really short here, but another one that ends with "I will restore the fortunes of Elam." This is the Lord's declaration, right? So again, it's not there's not a repeated, there's not something that's repeated. It seems to be very intentional who God is choosing to to restore.
Right.
But was there anything else at the end of 49 before we jump to deal with Babylon for the rest of this book?
Yeah, just this imagery of like these all like from the 4 corners of the heavens, right? I will scatter them to all these winds. Yeah, like I will bring the 4 winds of Elam. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay. Well, we will get to, Babylon here in chapter 50, right? Again, God has kind of left Babylon for last.
Yes.
Babylon does the work,
He uses them.
Yeah, he uses them, and then eventually Babylon gets theirs too, right? So we kind of start here in chapter 50, and this is back to what I was saying, right? Like he gives instructions, announce this to the nations in verse 2, right? Proclaim and raise up a signal flag, proclaim and hide nothing. Say, this. And so like these are words that he's giving to Babylon and to others. And we would get in 50 and 51 still referencing to Babylon, as well as and then we'll close out in 52 as to kind of what happens to Jerusalem. But let's talk about 50 and 51 together. It's a lot of pages here in my Bible as I'm turning through this. But let's take it all together as a whole. What jumps out to you in what God has to say to Babylon?
Again, I know we've mentioned this a couple of times already, but literally this is like part 2 Battle of the Gods, like to me, from Egypt to here, because once again, he's calling them out. Like verse 2, Bel is put to shame. Marduk is terrified. Like her idols are put to shame. Her false gods devastated. Like once again, it's so interesting that like it was the Lord who used Babylon and who sent them to destroy. And I feel like even Nebuchadnezzar even acknowledges at some point that like this was the Lord's hand. I don't know. I could be making that up. I feel like somebody did. Maybe it was Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, no, it was when eventually when Daniel and them are there, right? At least he still even acknowledges his God, but yet Yahweh can't be the only God, right?
Mm.
They still have these other gods that they're still rocking with, that the Lord is putting to shame here. And he's just like in verse 6, my people were lost sheep. Their shepherds led them astray. The prophets and the priests we're talking about, right? Guiding them to the wrong way of the mountains. They wandered from the hill place. They've forgotten their resting place. But like when Babylon gets them, like they don't do them right, So yeah, I thought that stuck out to me at first.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, and we had this conversation back in Isaiah. So for those of us that have been with us every day, some of this may sound a little repetitive, but I think what I have found so interesting about God's judgment on Babylon is, as you said, they were a vessel first.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe God gave Babylon a chance, right?
Yes.
Because we'll get to that when we get to Daniel, that there are opportunities for Nebuchadnezzar to recognize Yahweh as God, the only God, to serve. And not just him, but even Darius, who comes a couple generations later.
Yep.
Right? Like Babylon gets some chances, and the Israelites in Babylon get to expose and share kind of who God is with them. But they just choose arrogance and pride in their own selves, right? Like specifically Nebuchadnezzar, man, he was really about himself, right? Like, which, that's kind of where that's one of the things you keep pulling out is that arrogance. But 29 talks about her acting arrogantly. 32 says the arrogant will stumble and fall, right? Like there's this reference to it. But yeah, I think it's the big idea that still sticks out to me is that, like, yeah, man, don't ever mistake like God's will and the advancement of what he is doing for your own like glory. Yeah. Right? Like I think that's like one of the takeaways. And I think we've been there, man. Like it's so tempting, right? To like watch God use you, do something through you.
Right.
And it's so tempting to take the credit. Right? Like even as just like, for me, been a preacher for the last 12 years ish now. 14 years. Jeez.
You're old. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And like it's easy to get up to preach the gospel. I'm putting quotations more so as I just referenced the idea of what I think, but like preach the gospel and come away thinking like I did that. I slayed them. You know what I'm saying? Take the accolades and all of this, right? Like it's easy to do that. It's even easy to give the cliche, to God be the glory.
Right.
But really thinking to myself,
in your heart.
Like, yeah, I'm like, I did that. That was good. You know what I'm saying? I prepared, I studied, whatever, right? Like it's easy. It's easy to go and like feed the homeless or do those things and still feel like it's about you and what you did, right? And what you have access to. Like it's so easy to be a vessel for the Lord, do some things on his behalf, and still come out of it elevating yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that to me was the issue with Babylon. Like that's Nebuchadnezzar's issue, that's Babylon's issue, is that they were a vessel of the Lord. And as you said, recognize that God is behind all this and still come away elevating themselves.
Yeah.
And that's to me the warning that comes from this.
No, it's huge though. It's a huge warning too, like you said, because like I think that's how we have to look at all of our lives, whether we're doing something big or small, right? Like there is nothing that we do or can do, right, without God's at least permission. So yeah, no, it's real humbling. It really is.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy. But
yeah. But yeah, we get a reference here like that, kind of in this middle, or I guess middle is still maybe early in it, but essentially like verse 18.
I was at 17.
You were 17. Well, yeah, 17 kind of starts it, but just like we get this idea of God reminding Babylon he's doing this essentially because of what they did to Israel. And reminding them that like I did this just like I did to Assyria, who conquered the northern kingdom first, right? That part of Israel. And that but I loved 20 specifically, which just says like one will search for Israel's iniquity, but there will be none.
Yeah.
And for Judah's sins, but there will not be found. For I will forgive those I leave as a remnant. And I love this because I feel like this is so different than even what we just referenced to all these others that were like, we'll restore them. He said he will forgive them.
Yeah.
I don't know why that just feels different.
It does feel different.
Like that they just won't be iniquity or sin anymore. And I don't know. I thought that was just in the midst of what he's talking about with Babylon, that was a significant verse. But yeah, you said you were looking at 17. Was there something else about that stuck out?
It was just once again like calling out these different nations, like you said before. That like Assyria is gonna be first, right? And well, it's already happening right now, I'm sure, possibly. But Assyria is first, and the last to crush his bones will be Babylon. It is. I feel like that even seems a little bit different because it'd be different if like it wasn't those two together. Like here we see them two hand in hand, like Assyria first and then Babylon comes, right? And so yeah. I don't know, it just stuck out to me though. And that once again, this imagery of Israel being the stray lamb chased by lions, right? And so it is like he is speaking now as the shepherd again, right? Like
yeah. So other language I think stuck out to me. 31, we kind of had a conversation last week just about what it's like for God to be against you, right? And kind of just to have the weight of God against you and that. So when we read that stuck out to me.
But I am against you.
Yeah, just that piece specifically. But yeah, I mean, we kind of if you go to the later half of 50, we get this repetition of this sword again. So starting in 35, there's a sword that's over the Chaldeans. 36, a sword is against the diviners, right? A sword is against her heroic warriors. A sword is against the horses and the chariots. Even the horses getting it.
Everybody getting
like poor horses. They didn't do anything. Against all the foreigners among them. And they will be like women. And so a sword is against her treasuries. They'll be plundered, right? Like, so it just kind of talks about, man, it's just a complete destruction. It's this, like, there's a reference in war, like if you read kind of history books and things of that nature, is a term total war. Yeah. Right? Which is like the idea that it's more than just like, I'm coming after the people. And we're slaying people. But it's like, I'm starting to destroy even your like
libraries.
Libraries, water supplies, right? Like your food supplies, like your irrigation, like whatever. Like I'm going after even the infrastructure of where you are.
You cannot come back.
You can't survive. You can't be restored. Like you're going to starve to death. You're going to we're going to burn stuff down. And like, that's what it feels like. It's like, God is like, this is a total war. I'm not just killing the Babylonians. I am making sure there's no comeback. Like there's no return by destroying everything around them. And so that stuck out to me. But
no, I do feel like it is. He's making it clear that he's not just gonna make them like buckle, because I think he has made them so great that like at this point he has to tear them down so much for it to be humbled, right? Because if he just a little bit and take a little bit, they still have so much to still be proud about, right? And so and I think there's been somewhat references to Sodom and Gomorrah here or there, so it's good to see it here in verse 40. Like, just like he demolished them, there won't be like a single human, right, that be able to stay in it. And even when he starts to say like, even temporarily, right, as a temporary resident, he said this a couple of times in this book of Jeremiah, like you won't even be able to stay here temporarily. That he's been that bad. I'm just like, that's gotta be bad that I can't even like say, hey, we're gonna go over to Babylon, just stop for the night and keep it pushing. Like it's a no.
Yeah.
And then here we go, some more labor pains in 43.
Yeah, I figured you were gonna touch on those. Yeah. And like I said, that seems to be, to your point before, like it seems to be God's like ultimate illustration of pain, man, like
Help
of
us.
what humans can endure, right? Is that, and even just the fact that like it's not even just like a quick pain that's over, like it lasts and it's extended and repeated. So yeah. But yeah, let's jump into 51. And again, just kind of it continues this. It's a similar, like the same vein, right? It's continue to talk about Babylon and kind of what's coming to Babylon. I think one of the first things that jumped out to me here was in chapter or verse 6 of
Okay.
51, which is just like this. Well, I guess it backs up in verse 5, where it says, Israel and Judah are not left widowed by their God, the Lord of armies, though the land is full of guilt against the Holy One of Israel. So, like, he kind of points out that he's not leaving Israel abandoned here.
Yeah.
But then he gives them instructions to leave Babylon, save your lives, each of you. Don't perish because of her guilt, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will pay her for what she deserves. And so it's just kind of like, hey, don't get caught up in Babylon stuff. Like, this is your warning. Because I'm coming to take over Babylon, and I don't want to leave you. I don't want you to get caught up in that. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. But what jumped out to you in 51?
Yeah, I was actually still back in verse 1.
Okay.
Although that part was hitting for me too. Verse 6 was good. Verse 1 is like, I'm about to rouse the spirit of a destroyer against Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was interesting to me as he's talking about culturing up the spirit against them. And even in verse 11, he also continues that by saying, sharpen the arrows, fill the quivers. The Lord has roused the spirit of the kings of the Medes.
Medes.
Medes. Help me with that. Thank you.
It's the Persians.
That's what I was thinking. But I was just say Persia. Your girl, listen. Girls been at school too long. I can't.
It's hilarious.
But yeah, so and to my point, I think I was thinking about it earlier when he mentioned like Assyria and then Babylon. And I was thinking like, I wonder why he didn't just go on and say Persia, because we know that was coming too, right? But here it is.
Yeah.
Verse 11 though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what you were referencing kind of with Assyria and Babylon was, God was essentially pointing out that like the people of Israel were first destroyed by Assyria and it was completed by Babylon.
Right.
It was kind of that reference. So Persia comes to destroy Babylon. They don't really they actually free Judah and, and Israelites. So they actually become a part of God's plan to give the exiles back. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I think, just kind of referencing Persia and Medes. One of the sections that really stuck out to me in 51 was this sections from 20 to 23, where it's like, you are my war club, my weapons of war. With you I will smash nations. With you I will bring kingdoms to ruin. With you I will smash the horse and its rider, and et cetera, just like all these things that he'll smash. And I don't know, it seems to be a reference to the king of Persia and, to ultimately conquer Babylon. But again, just seeing this reference of this person being a tool and a weapon that God is using, right? That God is behind it, in the same way that the king of Assyria was that at one point, Babylon was that at one point. Now Persia is again someone to fulfill his will and his kingdom advancement. So I thought that section was very interesting to me as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there anything else in 51 that you thought was interesting?
No, we can keep pushing.
Okay. Well, it does end with kind of some instructions, like more of a narrative at the end of 51, right? Where essentially Jeremiah writes this on a scroll to be given to, to read in front of Babylon, essentially. And then he has to throw it in a river as another sign. And then we kind of get the last line, the words of Jeremiah end here, right? Yeah. It's so like, he has said his piece, on these different things. And so chapter 52, where we kind of end this book in our day, really just kind of gives us a narrative to highlight exactly how Jerusalem fell, kind of from a historical piece, and add some to that. Anything jump out to you as far as the story, which, we had referenced earlier in this book, some of this, but how it's written here?
Yeah, and this verse 3 just seemed a little, just real clear here. So I love how he says like a summary of what just was taking place. It was like, because of the Lord's anger, it came to the point in Jerusalem and Judah that he finally banished them from his presence.
Yeah.
And then Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. And it's like this, like, and finally, because he got angry, like, it came to that point. Like, it just finally got there.
Yeah.
Where, like, y'all just can't be in my presence anymore.
Yeah.
And then the fact that, like, he does, like, he just allows them just come in and, like, destroy the temple, right? Like in verse 13, like he burned the Lord's temple, the king's palace, or the houses in Jerusalem. All that. It started talking about it in verse 17, where the bronze pillars and stuff they broke into pieces, and the water cards, like all these different things, which is crazy that we saw the instructions of Moses for these. We saw the instructions in how Solomon built these. Like, we saw this, and just to see it now just become like demolished or just taken away, it's just crazy. And for that temple to be burned, which you said was Solomon's temple, it was just like supposed to be full of glory and lush and all of that. Yeah.
That's good. It is a great summary, right? Because we got some of these, the reference to what took place earlier in Jeremiah. We saw, some of the things that's referenced here, right? As far as Zedekiah being blinded and having to watch his sons die kind of before him, and, all of that kind of as well. But I think one of the details that really jumped out to me at the end was the number of people
Me too,
in exile, right? So it calls out here in verse 28 that these are the people Nebuchadnezzar deported in the 7th year, 3,023 Jews. In this 18th year, 832 people from Jerusalem. In Nebuchadnezzar's 23rd year, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, deported 745 Jews. So altogether, 4,600 people were deported. And just like how few people that was, right? Like, I mean, if you recall, when we were going through like the Israelites entering the promised land,
millions,
there were tens of thousands of each tribe, right? Like hundreds of thousands in some cases. Like, as you said, total, once you include children and women, millions of Israelites. By the time they go to Babylon, we're looking at 4,600 people. Babe, that's like a high school worth of people.
That was my high school for sure.
Like,
that's crazy.
4,600 people. And then I was going back to Nehemiah 7 points out how many exiles returned. And so I don't know if we get a summary of all these people, but if you go through this, I mean, just families alone had close to that. Like, there were descendants that had 2,000 and 2,800 and 2,300. So when you just think about who actually came back after, you see the result of them heeding Jeremiah's words to multiply, build houses and all that. Because the whole combined assembly numbered 42,306. So they were 10 times as many people if you look at Nehemiah 7 verse 66. And it said, but that's not including their male and female servants, male and female singers, horses, mules, donkeys, some other stuff. But by the time we get to that, it was 42,000. So again, 10 times many people that were deported. So I don't know. That's the piece that jumped out to me specifically. But anything else that you had? 52.
Now, was this the deportation? Was this the deportation of people, except both Assyria and?
No, this is just essentially the Jews from Jerusalem that went to Babylon.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. The Assyrians, it is probably important to kind of point out that like the Northern Kingdom kind of had a different experience when they were conquered by Assyria.
Sure did.
It's part of why, you know, the capital of that section is Samaria, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we get the term Samaritan, and we'll get to when we gotta get to the New Testament. Part of why there was this tension between essentially the people of Judah and Jerusalem, or not just Jerusalem, but people of Judah and the people of Israel or Samaria, and the Samaritans, was because rather than being like exiled, deported, and like coming back, there was a lot of mixing that happened when Assyria conquered Israel. And so like, you know, they were often looked at as like mixed. And not holy and set apart in some way. So it's kind of a different experience what happened when Assyria conquered Israel.
Right.
Which is why we get like all of Chronicles follows like Judah rather than like Israel. And even when we get to the lineage of Jesus and stuff, it kind of goes through Judah specifically. So yeah, the Bible follows a lot more of the Southern Kingdom, and that because of its tie specifically to Jesus. Cool. But speaking of that, to close out 31, we get this reference to Jehoiakim eventually being pardoned, right? So Zedekiah is the king at the time that Babylon comes, but his, you know, Jehoiakim is like his brother, I believe. But he's like, he had gotten exiled first, right? Like Nebuchadnezzar had come and taken Jehoiakim and then placed Zedekiah in charge. We kind of talked about this a little bit, like in charge of Judah. And but eventually there's a new king that comes in charge here in Babylon. And when that king comes in, he actually releases Jehoiakim, right? Pardons him and actually treats him nicely, gets to eat
new clothes.
Right. Eats in the king's house and has favor and all this other stuff. And it really does lead to ultimately relationships that Judah will have that will ultimately lead to their freedom and restoration and returned home. And it's just great to just see that favor, but also even just the line of, you know, King David's descendants continue on. So yeah, but
awesome.
Brings us to the end of Jeremiah here today.
Jeremiah.
Yep, we have a few more words from him. Lamentations is believed to be written by him, although the author is not specifically mentioned in the book. And so we get 5 chapters of that tomorrow to hear a little bit more about what he felt during that season. And then we will close the book on Jeremiah altogether and move on to our next prophet next week. Ezekiel,
who is also long-winded.
He's long-winded and very interesting.
Very interesting.
So that'll be
lots of visions.
Yeah, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We got Lamentations tomorrow. But appreciate you guys joining us today for the reading again. Hopefully this was helpful. I know it was kind of some repetitive information over yesterday and today. But hopefully, again, just add a little context as we kind of walk through that. Join us tomorrow for the book of Lamentations as we close out this week. But until then, take care.
Thank you for joining us for the Vibes Daily Podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or download our favorite, the Vibes Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.